I want to talk about Elon Musk and Doge, the Department of Government Efficiency. Now, the name of my channel is Leadership for a Crazy World. There's a lot of crazy things happening, and one crazy thing that is happening is how Elon Musk and Doge, are going about the reform of government. I'd like to share my perspective. Now, up front, what he is doing is treating a multifaceted, difficult challenge, an adaptive challenge, in a technical way. There's no leadership here. This is a chainsaw approach. Now, I'm not saying a chainsaw approach doesn't work. It might be just the thing that is needed under a particular set of circumstances, but it needs a lot of leadership from multiple areas to make it work, and I don't see that happening here. In reforming government, doing that breadth and depth of change, it requires a considerable degree of wisdom, sensitivity, and partnering. I don't see any of that. As I said, they're taking a tough, thorny challenge and treating it in a technical way. They are acting like they know with certainty what the problem is and what the solution must be. But do they really understand the problem, the complexity of the challenge? Maybe they have some insight, but maybe there are some flaws in their assumptions and their approach. Now, when you exercise leadership for an adaptive challenge, you get people to wrestle with, how my colleague Ronald Heifetz says it, with what's precious and what's expendable. What do we hold on to? What do we discard? That's a learning process. And you don't want to have a single individual unilaterally making those decisions. Why? Because such decisions are connected to the values and priorities of many, many people, to a community, or in this case, a nation. Now, imagine your mother one day decides she's going to clean up your messy room, and she does so without consulting you. She throws out your comic books, your old records, your favorite worn-out t-shirts, and your collection of Pokemon cards. You would be livid. Mother, why did you do this? Well, it's for your own good. You should thank me for making your room clean again. Now, that's a simple analogy, but you get the point. The Doge process, it seems to me at least that it's a highly secretive, haphazard, cruel, even a reckless process. They are indeed taking the figurative broom, the chainsaw or sledgehammer, call it what you will, to so many aspects of government. Now, it's really interesting because in the realm of government, the public service, America is the only country I know anywhere in the world where you have a powerful political faction demonize government. Government becomes the enemy. They are cheating you, stealing from you, making your life miserable. So we have to bring them down. And I should mention that having taught at Harvard for 20 years at a school of government, I've trained literally a few thousand people who work in government at the federal, state, and local level, not only in the US, but all around the world. And there's a lot of competent, talented, and committed people working in government, just like you and me and our families and friends. Why demonize them? In the realm of leadership, never demonize. It ignites a very ugly group dynamic. It's unhealthy. Just deal with reality. And reality is often complex. So the way you deal with complexity is you go into diagnostic mode, a learning mode. What's really going on here? The work of leadership is to shepherd people through that learning process. Now let's take USAID, US Agency for International Development, for example. When I was the chief advisor to the president of Madagascar, USAID worked closely with us on many programs. Madagascar is one of the poorest countries in the world, and USAID was a valuable partner. We were constantly trying to get them to do more. But that institution, as we know, is being gutted by Elon Musk and the Doge team, without any discussion or input from the US Congress or experts in the field of international development or foreign affairs. Now, maybe there are some problems with USAID. Could be some big problems, but it calls for a proper diagnosis. And a proper diagnosis would look at the mission, the higher purpose. What are the goals? What are the actions, the initiatives, and the programs? Are they consistent with that higher purpose and mission? And what is the impact? And do those actions and programs produce the desired outcome? What are the flaws in the process? And what is maladaptive and counterproductive and not particularly useful? what is adaptive, productive, and very useful. See, you are seeking to produce what Chris Argyris would call valid, useful, and reliable data, so you can make informed decisions. This needs to be a very intense and comprehensive learning process. Argyris was a professor of organizational behavior and organizational learning at Harvard. He concluded that most human systems are limited learning systems, particularly when people are highly political and bypass dealing with real issues and dealing with complexity, the complexity of the reality of the problem. Maybe they have an agenda and they're seeking to impose that agenda. Also, that limited learning system is reinforced when people, managers and executives, so-called change agents, when they're operating from these big, whopping generalizations, untested assumptions, and they believe they know what the problem is and what the solution should be. And they believe their approach is the right approach and in no need of rigorous examination or public scrutiny. But if there are flaws in their logic or their conjectures or their strategy or approach, the results can be adverse or damaging. That's the danger of a limited learning system that is rife with unhealthy political dynamics and where decisions are based on ideology, or the quality of the communication lacks rigor and people are secretive, or they don't inquire into the assumptions and reasoning underlying various initiatives. In that kind of environment, inevitably poor decisions will be made. Now, the point is that the only way you can make informed choice, better decisions, is if you have valid, accurate information that emerges through a solid interactive learning and testing process, a discovery process, a sense-making process. Now, the process of generating valid information to make good decisions, it takes time. You have to ripen issues and pace the work, and you have to wrestle with the important consideration of who to include and who to exclude in that process. And you have to bring the public service along with you and help them learn and make substantial changes. But you also have to bring the nation on this journey, because they too are interested in the process and the outcome. They have a stake in the outcome. Now, you don't want to make such critical choices based on a hunch, a whim, or an emotional knee-jerk reaction because you don't like something. You may be onto something, but that's not your decision to make on your own. That's why a learning approach is important. So eventually, when it comes time to making a choice, the choice makes sense, not only to you, but to others, even though they might be looking at it from different angles or have competing interests. Also, you don't want to send a bunch of young, inexperienced computer nerds to do that kind of work. Elon Musk has chosen some, no doubt, very bright and young tech wizards to be a part of the Doge team. The problem with that is they are inclined to look at the task through a very narrow technical lens. They know nothing about the history of these programs and how they were formulated or how effective they are. They know nothing about the values these initiatives are supposed to address, the foundational values, the orienting values. And they know nothing of the amount of adaptive work that's gone into building and sustaining these various programs and initiatives. The point is, you cannot approach such a serious exercise in a narrow, insular way. You must think systemically, and you have to approach it systemically. And you have to think about the impact of your decisions on the wider system. So when you close down a program at USAID, for example, what will be the impact for the local village or the country you are trying to help? What is the impact in terms of how others perceive you? There are humanitarian problems and concerns you are trying to address. They will be impacted. But you are also building relationships and promoting the values of support, helping out, friendship, and what have you. You burn that bridge. You undermine those relationships that may have taken decades to establish. Now, the Department of Veterans Affairs, that's also had major cuts that impact the services of support for the well-being of veterans and their mental health and physical health. Funding has been cut for scientific research in health, the environment, changing weather patterns, and what have you. These are initiatives where you really have to grapple with the question of what's precious and what's expendable. And Doge is doing its business on the Social Security Administration. Offices are being closed, staff have been fired, there's a substantial reduction in services. Their approach has generated a significant degree of chaos all across the country. The Social Security Administration operates the largest government program in the nation, administering social insurance programs, retirement, unemployment, disability benefits, and what have you. Nearly 70 million Americans every month receive a Social Security benefit. It's something like 22% of the federal budget. Is there waste? Are there inefficiencies? I don't know. Possibly so, but do a proper diagnosis. Elon Musk, he calls it a Ponzi scheme. So when you say it's a Ponzi scheme, what do you mean by that? What's the data? Now, when you wrestle with the decision to keep something or to let it go, it's vital to connect that decision to what's at stake and to values. What's at stake in terms of the potential gains and possible losses, and what are the values underlying that initiative? So coming back to this group of young, wet behind the ears technical experts, they don't have a clue as to what the values are associated with foreign aid and development work. You can't expect them to know that. They are looking at financial numbers, a different set of indicators. For Elon Musk, that's never been his concern. He's a businessman. And a businessman thinks about profit and loss and efficiency. Now, of course, you have to think about costs and efficiency. They are legitimate concerns. But how you spend your money, where you spend your money, and what you spend your money on, that's about values. Values inform those decisions. Values are the vital features of the human context that give meaning to what we do. Now, another point, how you frame the challenge and frame your role in addressing the challenge is extremely important. Framing is a way to orient the work and to get people's attention and sustain that attention. The term Doge, the Department of Government Efficiency, I don't like that term. It sounds too Orwellian. I mean, in the 1950s, you had efficiency consultants. We've gone beyond that in terms of understanding organizational change, productivity improvement, institutional effectiveness, and the management of large bureaucracies and what have you. Okay, so be it. They are framing their task as the cutting of waste, fraud, and abuse on behalf of creating efficient government. If you ask anyone, should we fight against waste, fraud, and abuse, they will say yes, let's fight against it. None of us like waste, fraud, and abuse. That's very emotional. Creating an enemy, like turning government and its programs into a terrifying, fire-breathing dragon that's wreaking havoc on our lives, and turning Elon Musk into a noble, virtuous, courageous, heroic dragon slayer. Waste, fraud, and abuse. They are three different things. Take waste, for example. Who determines what is waste? What is the logic or reasoning behind that? Fraud. That's a criminal problem. Inspector generals, the Justice Department, the FBI, the police, they are supposed to deal with that. But from what I understand, they've gotten rid of independent inspector generals. Abuse. Abuse of what? Be specific. What's the evidence? Now let's say there is waste, fraud, and abuse, and serious reform is needed because the system is so broken or rotten. Well, treat it as an adaptive challenge. Take the time and do it right. Ask the heads of every department to work on a process to figure out what is working, not working, and what needs to be changed and what needs to be eradicated. Create a new compelling aspiration that can take the provision of government services to a higher level. Turn it into a creative exercise. Develop a more robust accountability system to hold people to account for spending, for programs, and for outcomes. Promote, facilitate, and reward innovation at all levels. I mean, that's something Elon Musk excels in. That's what he should be bringing to the process. Now, I'm currently in Singapore, and this is interesting. Singapore has a relatively large government, but a highly effective government. Its public service was recently ranked in an Oxford University study as the best in the world. And I've done a lot of work with the executives in the government here in Singapore, and I can assure you that their strengths pertain to an uncompromising commitment to clean, good governance at all levels. I mean, if you get caught with your hands in the till here, or doing something you shouldn't be doing, you are in big trouble. And they are constantly doing adaptive work and reform of some sort. There's an ongoing commitment to management and leadership development and a serious focus on innovation in terms of processes and the provision of government services. You combine all that with a strong mission-driven culture, government functions exceptionally well. So come to Singapore and see for yourself. You just might learn something. Now, my point here is, in framing the challenge, it should not be a battle against big government per se, but the adaptive work of creating a high-performing, high-functioning public service that can deliver services, yes, efficiently, but also effectively. Now let's look at the approach Elon Musk is using and how that approach might be improved, the chainsaw approach, the dragon slayer approach. It can only get you so far, so there are serious limitations to that approach. You generate a big mess and then you have to clean up that mess. In business, particularly if you own that business, maybe you can get away with that, but government is not business. If that's your approach, you'll do too much damage. Bad decisions will be made. You'll create a climate of mistrust and animosity. People will be fearful. They'll be worried about who might be targeted next. The system will become an anti-learning system, unable to correct error, address tough complex problems, or make adjustments or course corrections. So a good way to look at change is to consider both the first-order consequences, the immediate results, and second-order consequences, the ripple-on effect. That's when you start to think about your approach systemically. Now, an example of the ripple-on effect, second-order consequences. The US is already a highly fractured political country. There's a lot of tension within groups and between groups. So unilaterally making such important decisions without sufficient analysis or consultation, or pacing the rate of change, that adds further to the divide and the fragmentation. The larger fabric of society becomes more volatile, fragile, fickle, and tenuous. Now, Elon Musk, he's justified his approach because he says the US has a large budget deficit, and you have to cut government spending and be radical in doing so. No pain, no gain, so to speak. Okay, good. Throw that problem back to Congress and the top economists and experts in the field of governance, and to the American people. Ripen the issue, pace the work, don't rush that. Get the American people to grapple with the questions pertaining to what do we keep and what do we discard, what's important, what's not important, what's precious, what's expendable, what's at stake. Develop a solid holding environment for the change, for the process. By that I mean a network of partners and orienting principles to hold, to orient, and to support the process and contain the inevitable conflicts and debates. Those partners can aid in the demands of navigating such a complicated, awkward, and prickly process, and help in keeping the attention on the adaptive work, the work of problem solving and change and innovation. Now, if you treat a comprehensive reform like this as an adaptive challenge, will there be losses? Probably so, but those losses will be based on informed decision making. And the work of leadership is to help people sustain loss. Many people have invested their time, their energy, their careers, their lives in this. So loss can be very painful. And telling people to just trust me, it'll all work out in the end, or get over it, move on, that doesn't help. That's not leadership. No, the change process should be treated as a transition challenge, a transition for the government and a transition for public servants. So help people to make a transition. Help people to embrace a new aspiration, to engage in a voyage of discovery, and to make sacrifices and suffer some loss if needed. People will support you and participate in the process, and even sustain some loss if they can see the logic underlying what you are doing and why certain choices are being made. They will support you if they feel supported, and if you prove yourself trustworthy. If they don't understand your logic, and they don't feel supported, and you are secretive and not transparent, they won't trust you, and they will resist. Some might outright rebel. And this leads to my final point, which is an important point. When seeking to exercise leadership for this kind of change, don't you, the change agent, become the center of attention. Don't make it about you. Make it about the work. Elon Musk seems to enjoy the spotlight too much. He gets a kick out of it. That becomes a distraction. In taking on important problems, a change of this magnitude, the spotlight should be on the issues, the adaptive work, the learning work, the problem-solving work, the sense-making work, the creative work, the higher aspiration, and not on a single individual. Also, it doesn't help when that individual is a billionaire and enjoys prancing around wearing a funny hat and is an active influencer in the political process. And given his current and high-profile business pursuits, it also raises too many ethical questions and concerns around conflicts of interest. And that's never a good thing. You really have to manage the boundaries, the personal and professional boundaries, and keep the attention on the adaptive work. You have to maintain the integrity of the work and the integrity of that space. No, Elon Musk should never have been given such an onerous responsibility. It's not fair to him, and it's not fair to the nation. And one thing for sure, whatever that process he is using, it is not an adaptive approach, it's not a learning approach, and it's not an effective approach. It certainly doesn't deserve to be called leadership. If you want to use the term leadership, let's call it for what it is: counterfeit leadership. Okay, that's my take on what's happening. How do you see it? Let me know your thoughts. Join the conversation in the comments section below. Also, subscribe to my channel, and I need your support. I've already put out a bunch of videos, and there will be more videos coming out. I'm trying to get 2, 3, or 4 out every month. I'll continue to talk about current events and historic events, and to extract or apply lessons on leadership and change and adaptive work. We live in this crazy world, and given the complexity of these challenges, we need better leadership in all sectors, in all domains of human activity, and we need more effective and dynamic agents of positive change. That's why I've set up the channel. Okay, talk to you later.